Okay, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to do a follow-up review on the home theater room tour and just give you a look at some photos that I took during the build process. And just keep in mind, this was not like from the ground up construction. This was basically a renovation or a treatment of this room to prepare it for use as a home theater. So the walls were torn down. I did tear a lot of trim off of doors and windows and things like that to flatten the walls out for the wall treatments. But this was not a from the ground up build. I wish it could have been, but this is just an extra room in the house that we were able to repurpose as a theater room, and it's worked out great up to this point. So basically, what you're looking at here is the way that the room started out. The previous owners had painted a interesting pattern on the walls here. This was like a second den for them. This is an upstairs room in the house. So this is the door to the room, obviously, and back here you'll see later is there are two closets. So moving on, just threw this in here. There's inside one of the closets. There's a small access door to this back part of the attic, and that ended up being a place for me to access some of the wiring and the speaker wire runs that I had to make. So I found this, I think it's called Attic Track or Attic Deck online, and just installed some of this in there to walk on and store things on. There's a little more of it. And of course, I had to buy some tools for this endeavor. And, you know, everybody has their favorites, but I kind of stuck with DeWalt once I had a few other tools. Got a nice miter saw and stand. Got a table saw. This is a rack that I picked up on Facebook Marketplace that I planned to use in the room and did initially. Eventually, I went with a larger unit, more suited for audio video setups, but this works just fine. It was a nice little rack, just needed to be cleaned up. And, I think I picked this up for 40, $50. Had a nice plexiglass door on the front. So if we plan to use Marketplace or one ads, whatever, for items like this in your room, that racks like this are great for storing your home theater equipment. So here's another view of the room. Here are the back closet areas. There are two like this. And here you can see I've got a cheap business type projector, office projector set up just to play with and a sheet on the wall. So early days there. Okay, here's a shot at the back of the room with the two closets I'm talking about. And this is the first picture where you can kind of get an idea of the weird shape of the ceiling. So the ceiling is about 9 feet in the middle, and on both ends, front and back, it slopes down to the height of the closets, which is probably 7.5 feet, maybe, if I recall correctly. But this ended up being a real challenge to mount a projector and a screen. Okay, and here's another side view, and again, you can see the ceiling, the way it slopes on both ends. I've got a big window here to contend with, so it's not ideal for a theater at this point, but I can see what it could be. Just have some obstacles to work around. So next up, we have a friend who gladly took this furniture off of our hands that was in the room. It's a nice couch, so I wrapped all that up and moved it down the stairs myself, and we got it loaded on a trailer and moved to a new home. Here's a shot of the JBL speakers that I use for my front left, center, and right channels. I've got three of these I picked up on a 12-hour drive. Well worth it. These have been great. Really love these. These are the JBL 3722N with the horns and the compression drivers, 15-inch subs in the bottom of them. Great speakers, especially for the price. Again, don't be afraid to pick up used stuff if it's in good condition. So these were great. I mean, no damage at all, but maybe a few scratches here and there that nobody's ever going to see. Okay, this is a shot of the garage where I offloaded the duct board. So this is the duct board that's used throughout the room for the sound absorption and diffusion properties in the room, for the sound and wall treatments. But anyway, this stuff is 4 foot by 10 foot long. And if you were to go buy this at an HVAC store, you'll spend probably between 80 and $125 a sheet, depending on when and where you get it. But I was able to find this at a construction salvage reseller where they get things that are off of old jobs that they had too much of, overruns, whatever. It was in great shape, and I think I picked up 20 sheets of this for I think $20 a sheet. So I took as much as I could get because I wasn't really sure how much I was going to use. What I might mess up and have to have extra. So as much as I could load on the trailer. There's another shot of some of it separated, and you can see on the back side it has this silvery type finish. So in the room, when this is facing the inside of the room, this obviously is the deflection um, sections of the treatment, and then this black part is the absorption. So this is rigid fiberglass insulation. It's also referred to as duct board. Cuts very easily, messy to work with, but not terrible. Back here is some of the Rockwool bat insulation that I ended up using in my front stage area for sound isolation there. And then, of course, these 2x6s that I got to build the stage with. Table saw, of course. Table saw. Gotta have a shop vac, making a mess. Okay, here's the 2x6s that I ripped down to use for the front stage. And some 1x2s that I'm not sure where I used these initially, but I think I was going to use them for footing strips for the wall treatments, but ended up having to use something else. Okay, moving the wood upstairs into the room, starting to assemble the front stage and make those cuts. This was going to be really heavy, I could tell as I started to put it together, so I decided to make it in two sections. The room's about 16 feet wide, so these are almost 8 foot wide sections. Okay, and you can see I've got one assembled and pushed into the corner there. Got two sections built, and then connecting those together, clamping them up, trying to keep things straight. And there's the finished assembly for the front stage. This is intended to be about 7 inches high. And then here you can see it with the Rockwool bat insulation installed inside of the cavities here, and my 4x8 sheets of plywood that I've ripped down to fit on top of this. Another shot of the Rockwool and the plywood screwed down to these sections, and that completed the stage area. Lots of screws in that. And here's a quick shot of just a desperation move to set up a screen or a mocked up screen to take a look at what it might look like, dream a little bit. You kind of have to do that when you're going through this process and keep the end product in mind, but they can also sidetrack you too, so don't get too bogged down in that. Here's the window that you saw in another picture. Obviously, I knew right away this was going to be a problem because of the window sill sticking out. Because I needed flat walls to install the furring strips and the acoustic treatments. So I had to remove those pieces, the windowsill, and used some of those 1x2 pieces to kind of frame out the inside of this window to accept some sort of insulation. I think this was a whole fiasco. I ended up doing this window like 3 different ways before I got it the way it needed to be. So this was version 1, where I used framing strips to frame this out, and then cut sections of rock wool to fit inside here. And then this is just some thin plywood or sheeting to help this from not rolling out of the window. And that's what I thought I'd be using at that point. And then I decided to get this black piece of carpeting at Lowe's and put that over top of this to prevent any leakage through the window. And there's a quick shot of the JBS setting up on the stage just to see what that would look like, and figure out placement, that kind of thing. And we're back at the window and decided to do something completely different. Took out the rock wool and realized that I needed something to secure one of my columns. Was going to go right here for surrounds. And of course, this window was not going to give me anything to secure it to. And there was going to be a speaker right in this area. So I needed to put something here for support and backing. So I took everything out and started this process over with version 2.0 of trying to fill the window. This is outside of the house, looking up at that room. That's the window from the outside to the theater room. And back inside, I'm ripping off more window trim and door trim. Here's a shot of the first hole I cut for the Atmos speakers. This ended up being a good idea to go ahead and start on this, because this allowed me to see what was going on up in this space above, and see what I was working with as far as obstacles and pulling wire. And the Atmos speakers came with these nice plastic covers or plugs once you've cut the holes, that I think this is really for painting purposes, and also to keep insulation from falling out. And here you can see I've got, at this point, I think I had all 4 of the Atmos holes cut out and started to pull wire. So this was a neat trick, because I would pull wire from the other end of the room and jump it to this hole in the ceiling. And then it was just a short run to reach through this hole and shoot across to this hole with no wire. So this basically gave me a jumping off point from one end of the room to the other. And this is the equipment closet, which is one of the closets in the rear of the room. And you see that I've got my 20 amp dedicated 20 amp circuits installed here for the amplifiers and other equipment. I started to pull speaker wire. This is not all of it, obviously, but I think this is maybe 3 channels. Put it into this closet. This is a shot of inside of the closet. This is not a speaker cutout. This is a LED light cutout, and this wire is running across the back of the closet, ceiling at the back of the closet, into that small attic space that I showed you earlier. So again, having access to grab wires and keep them going from one spot to the other. This was temporary, just for access. And there's another shot of one of the front Atmos speakers. This wire right here is for the surround speaker that I was referring to in front of this window. So there's going to be a column here. So that's why I just have that random place this wire is coming out of the ceiling. It's concealed by the column that's going to end up there. Another shot of Atmos cutout. And again, over here, there's going to be a column, so there's a wire hanging there. And every day I would try to kind of put my tools back in order and clean up a little bit so things weren't all over the place. I wasn't constantly trying to find a tool and try to keep things close at hand. Another shot of the closet with more wire coming in. There's a shot of the LED light I was telling you about inside the closet. These used to have fluorescent lights. I pulled those out and installed these. More trim coming off of these back closets to try to work around that. And here's a shot of the front stage that I end up in going back and installing some of this furniture fabric mesh underneath to help keep the rock wool insulation inside, and also made this easier to move. Here's a shot of me using the laser level I picked up. This was a great tool to have in the room for this process, leveling up and marking out places where the columns would go on the walls. Speaking of columns, here's my first attempt at trying to put together one of these from the simple design I came up with. It's basically a top and a bottom made of MDF square shapes, and then that's held together or attached by 1x4s. I believe these were 1x4s or 1x6s, and this is just like white pine that you can pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's pretty inexpensive, pretty easy to work with. Here's a closer shot where you can see how this goes together. There's a 1x2 sitting on top of a 1x4 or 1x5. I can't remember which, but so you can see here that this small 1x2 on the inside gives a place for the MDF to be inset here and kind of create this profile. And that also is where the fabric covered uh, panels sit inside of this column that can be removed. And I showed that in the video earlier. Another shot of the back side of the columns. A little bit of sanding. And there's the first one finished, and I carried that upstairs from outside and put it in the room. And up in the room at the top, I didn't want these super tight because if they were too long, I wouldn't be able to raise them up and get them in the room and fit against the ceiling. So this is right where I wanted this to be, right where the ceiling changes height here. So there's one of these on the left and the right hand side of the room. And there's the other side. There's a nice little cheap or inexpensive battery powered paint gun I picked up to spray paint these columns. And these are coming along, as you can see. I was just building these one at a time, trying to, get my measurements down and get them looking as close to one another as possible. Another little tool I picked up for doing the fabric covered panels that went inside of the columns. And here's version 3.0 of the window fiasco. So, of course, I pulled out all of this pink insulation and installed some of the rigid ductboard that I was using throughout the room for acoustical treatments. So I cut that to fit inside the window and then sealed that up with HVAC tape. So that totally eliminated any light leakage and also I think was a better thermal barrier. Doesn't look nice, but again, all of this is covered up. Okay, here you can see that I started to paint the ceiling with the Roscoe TV black paint. So this stuff was not easy to work with. It was like painting with tar, very thick, not easy to roll on. But as I was painting the room, you could just feel the whole place closing in on you. It felt like all the light was being sucked out of the room. There's a stack of columns up on the front stage. So I had these moved out of the way while I was painting in the room. And there's the first coat, which didn't go on great. As you can see, there's a lot of splotchiness, but this took several coats to get on. And starting to look a little better here, getting a little better coverage. Really gives a strange optical illusion or effect that makes the this side of the room look really low. And there's another view, and you can see the profile of the ceiling again here. And this is the screen wall, actually. And having to work around some obstacles here, of course, several of my outlets were right in the way of where a column needed to be or a column edge needed to be. Back in the closet again, pulling more wire. And here's another column, and this one is at the back of the room. So there's two of these left and right, and these were a little different because they had to have an angled top. So that was a little bit of a challenge from standard square ones I was making on the other side of the room. But that worked out fine. There's a view looking down, and you can see here this outlet worked out fine. It just went right inside the column out of my way. And I've got all the columns built at this point and just kind of dry fit into the room to verify placement of where each of these is going to go. There's a shot of the angled top of one of the columns. And this one back here, these are the rear surrounds. So there's a left and right rear surround column that are shorter than the others. These actually flank the or sit in front of the closets in the rear of the room. Shot of the other side of the room with the columns in place. Again, another shot of the angled top of that column. Got angles on these because these rested against the descending angle of the rear of the room here as the ceiling comes down to meet the top of the closets. Yeah, this was an exciting day. FedEx made a special delivery for me of the JVC RS3100 or the NZ8. I actually picked this up used with about, I think, less than 50 hours on it from a forum member on ABS. So it ended up being a great deal. Also got from that same transaction this Panamorph DCR J1 lens. So this is one of the direct fit Panamorph lenses made specifically for the JVC projectors. I should say specifically for the 65 millimeter lens JVC projectors, which would be the base model, the mid-range model that I have. Above that, when you get up to the 100 millimeter lens JVC projector, you need the full size DCR Panamorph lens, which is not a direct connect. It has its own mounting plate. It's a little bit larger lens and more expensive as well. But this worked out great because I was planning to use a Panamorph anyway. I was planning to use CinemaScope format screen. So there's a shot of the projector unpackaged. Just checking that out. It looks good. Previous owner took good care of it. Didn't use it for long. And here's another shot of the inside of the room looking out in the hall. We were decorated for Halloween at this point, I believe, so you'll probably see some spider webs and things like that. Here's an outside shot again of the columns. So I think this was the hottest day of the year. I decided to go out and paint these. Not real smart. So this is the paint that I decided to use. I believe it's called steel blue or steel gray. Just looking for some contrast in the room. I had a lot of people comment in the previous video about why is your carpet not black? Why is everything not black? And I get it. I like a dark room, and I think I've achieved that for the most part. But the carpet in the room was already laid just literally weeks, maybe a few months prior to me starting this project, and I just didn't have it in me to change the carpet out in that one room. At some point, we're going to sell this house, and I'm going to have to tear all this down anyway. So the carpet's fine. And the columns, I just wanted to have a little bit of contrast. So I went with a color like this. I think they came out pretty nice. So I got these back in the house. A little bit of overspray on the inside, of course, but that's not going to be seen. Always good to have drop cloths. Went through a lot of these. And there's one of the columns freshly painted, baking in the sun. So they did dry quickly, but it was very hot that day, if I recall. All right, and so now I've started bringing the columns back into the room. You can see that the ceiling is looking really dark, and the columns are beginning to be put in place, and they're painted. So the walls are the only thing that hasn't been touched yet, really, at this point. Another shot, the columns, and another obstacle, a three gang switch here, right where this column needed to rest. And this is as you first look into the room. This was a great little tool. This is the best stud finder I've ever had. It's not electronic or anything. It's basically just a magnet, and it works great at finding the drywall screws. Okay, here's all of the grills and return registers that I took down off the ceiling because, of course, those had to be painted black. And there we are. And back at this switch problem, trying to figure out what to do there. And then I've got another problem with this column. Got a little overspray on the front of this one. I ended up taking this back out and sanding that and repainting it. Kind of a sloppy job there, but again, it's a dark room, so you won't see things like that. But I went ahead and fixed it. It was bothering me. And of course, this outlet was just in the way, so I ended up pulling that down and reinstalling it a little further to the right of the column. This is the door frame, which I took down because I had to reverse a swing on the door so that it didn't swing into the room because it was going to get in the way of my seating, or at least I thought at the time. So there's the spider webs outside on the railing of the banister. So, like I said, this was taken around Halloween time and shot from outside of the room looking in. Okay, so here you can see between the columns on the floor, I created this trim piece where the framing would sit for the wall treatments. So this was just something to build off of. Looking back, I probably could have skipped this step and just taken it all straight to the floor, but it was easy enough to paint these black and cut them to fit between the columns and have a base to start with. So that's what that looked like. So I picked up these little lights on Amazon. They were really inexpensive, but they were white and they didn't have them in black. So I painted these black, just spray painted them, taped off all of the lenses and parts of the fixture on the inside so I didn't get paint on them. And they came out pretty good. Marking the templates on the ceiling for the lights. And back to another receptacle that I had to move. You know, again, it's not pretty, but all of this is covered up by the acoustical wall treatments, and they got that outlet out of the way of a column. No wire getting pulled into the equipment closet. And here's a shot of that little space inside, small access door to the attic space behind the room. Again, this was great to be able to get in and pull wire and route it out of the way. But I wish this had been a larger space and maybe a conditioned space. I could have put the projector in here and not had the noise of the projector, the heat of the projector, and made this just like a projection space. But this was unconditioned attic space and not a lot of room, so that just didn't work out. Okay, another shot of the ceiling and the templates for the lighting. Trying to take my laser measurements and get things lined up. All right, I've got all my wire pulled for my uh, Atmos speakers and wire pulled for the lights. There was a ceiling fan right here in the middle of the room, which obviously I took down, and that's what I tapped over for all these lights. And just kind of daisy chained everything together. And here's the tool that I referred to in the video for the Fabric Track or Fabric Mate uh, material. And this comes with the roller tool and what they call a 4-in-1 tool and a rocker tool. So between these three tools, it makes it really easy to insert the fabric into the track and get it tight and give it a really nice look. This is the front right column, which does not house any speakers, but it worked out really well for routing my speaker wiring to the front, left, center, right channels, and my two subwoofers behind the screen. So all of this wire got pulled through the ceiling into this column, down out of the bottom of this column, and into the stage area. And there it is, set in place. And again, these are just a great place to have things like this. Things can serve more than one purpose in the room. And back to another light switch. This is that 3-gang switch, and I pulled out everything, trying to move this box over out of the way of the column and install some rocker switches that would be Wi-Fi enabled. What a mess. And I got that moved over, put in a new work box, installed the switches so I can control these with my Harmony remote. And another outlet moved to the inside of a column. And there's the 3-gang switch just to the right in my little repair job. Went through a lot of this cheap Lowe's flat black spray paint in this room. And this was interesting. So something you may not think about when you're building a room like this is when you're putting 2.5 inches of material along your walls, your outlets have got to get pulled out to meet that. You, I mean, you could just bury them in there, but I didn't want to do that. So I found these plastic spacers on Amazon where you can just connect these together and clear out from the wall your outlet to match the profile of what you're installing on the wall. So this worked out really well. And this is the frame pieces for my Stewart Studio Tech 130 G4 screen that sat on a corner here for quite a while I was building the room. And there's the tube that the screen material comes in. And this is a shot again of the outside of the house, and you may not be able to tell it from here, but these cheap PVC blinds that were in the room literally melted like spaghetti because I did a really stupid thing. There's another shot from the inside. So when I put that duct board in that you saw earlier, which was version 3.0 of these window of this window plug design, I put the shiny side towards the outside. So of course that just created a huge reflector that baked those mini blinds from the inside out. So bad idea there. So I pulled down the mini blinds and came up with this idea of using the same duct board, but putting the shiny side towards the inside of the room, covering the boards with white material to help reflect light back towards the outside. More floating strips. So these are just 2x4s that are ripped in half, and these create the structure, I guess, for the duct board in the room for the acoustical treatments. And there's a shot of the little base molding pieces that I made to, again, fur out from the wall. So I have these little spacer blocks behind them. And there's one of the outlets. And back to the window again. This may be an older shot because I had the pink insulation in there. Or no, this is still version 3.0, but I was just tucking in some extra space around the duct board with some pink insulation I had left over. And here's a first shot of kind of a completed section. So I've got a column here, a column here. The ceiling's black. I've got an Atmos cutout here, and I have the wall section framed out or furred out with the ripped 2x4 pieces. So all of this is screwed into the wall with black drywall screws to create this place to secure the board to, and secure the fabric track too. And kind of tough to see here. I'm trying to zoom in, but again, the furring strips are attached to the wall, and then the fabric track is stapled to that. So I use a small pneumatic staple gun to attach these. This is like a extruded plastic track that the fabric is tucked into. So these get stapled to your wood furring strips. There's my little air compressor, and you can see there the pneumatic staple gun. And there's a closer shot of the fabric track. And here's the beginning of that same section, installing the duct board. So the bottom areas of the room, of course, are going to be deflection up to a certain point, and then above this, you'll start to see absorption. Okay, and there's an absorption section. So all of this is the same material. This duct board again has this black side, which is the absorption side, and then it has this blue side, which is used for deflection. And there's a completed section. And here's the fabric going on. And so you just cut roughly the size you need to fit in that section. And this is the Acoustimac DMD fire-rated acoustically transparent fabric. That's a lot to say. But basically the sound travels through this fabric and hits that absorption area, hits the deflection area, and does what it needs to do. So this is just a rough test fit of the fabric. It's just tucked in ever so slightly into the track, but not secured yet, obviously. And here you see a completed section. So the fabric is nice and tight. It's tucked into the fabric track sections here, and it just looks like a painted wall when it's done. So I had to take the columns down a few times during this process because as you would start to install the fabric track sections and roll the material in, it was really tight, and the columns and these sections fit so tight together, close together, that it was hard to work the tool in that area. So I would remove the columns while I was doing this. And there you can see the profile, how thick the furring strips are to accommodate that material. And again, there's a finished section with the columns flanking it. And same thing happens on the other side of the room, which has that window in the way. So this is finally getting covered up. So again, we've got the base section that touches the floor, the furring strips that frame out the area to accept the ductwork. There's the outlets on this particular wall. And then behind that, here's another section where the ceiling starts to slope down. So we're having to start making kind of some angle cuts at this point, but the process is the same. Frame it out, fill it, cover it. And that's the section where the window was, so it's like it never happened. So I kind of butchered this area a little bit, trying not to waste this stuff, and I would use scraps wherever I had a place that would fit. So that is the right side wall, almost complete, but not covered with material yet. And there's another panel completed with the material in place. And again, there's the front, left, center, and right, and subwoofer speaker wires coming out of the ceiling here, from the back of the room up to the front, and then run through this column to conceal them. Okay, again, this is the back right side, and you can see here that we've taken some HVAC tape and used spray adhesive to attach that to the absorption areas of this panel. So this creates kind of a combo panel. Again, these are reflective or diffusion areas. The black area is absorption. And in this case, this becomes a combination panel because it has some absorption and it has some deflection with the silver stuff on it here. There's two completed panels with the scraps on the floor that I trimmed off. So once you start rolling in the material, you'll have a little bit of excess that maybe you won't be able to get into the track. So you can trim up as you go and continue to roll with the tools, and it just gets tighter and tighter and securely. Okay, another little bit closer shot so you can start to see what it looks like at the back of the room. Again, these closets, this closet here accommodates the equipment now, and the other side accommodates a small refrigerator and snack bar area. And there's a overhead shot of the base molding profile that I designed. And this is at the back of the room on a small section of wall where the side wall ends and transitions into the closets. So again, same concept, furring strips, ductwork in between and covered with the acoustically transparent fabric. And here again, you can see the sections of the fabric track being attached to the furring strips. The other side, and then a completed small skinny section here. Just kind of a close up of the way the fabric looks. More sections getting completed. And there's a finished corner. And here's a wire dangling here where there's going to be a column at the rear. This is one of the rear surround speakers. And one of the angle columns comes down to meet this section at the rear of the room. And this is the center of the rear wall between the two closets. So there's a light switch on both sides here that controls the light in both of these closets. So I had to make a lot of cutouts in this section of ductwork to accommodate these switches and receptacle. It's one of the rear surround columns in place. And here's the back side of that rear surround column. You can see how I just attached it with a scrap piece of 1x2 to the door frame. And there's the bottom of one of the rear surround columns, again, attached with a scrap piece of 1x2 or 2x4 to this door frame. Another third out receptacle and a light switch. And there's a shot of one of the installed RSL, I believe these are, Atmos speakers. These have been great. They're really inexpensive. I'll put a link to those in the description. And here's again that section of the rear of the room being built out. Footing strips are up, the fabric track is stapled on, and the ductwork is installed inside of that with cutouts and furred out sections for the light switches and the receptacle. And the fabric is on. So that section was finished, and that's what the finished outlet and switches look like. And this is going back on the other side of the room towards the front, with where the ceiling slopes down to the front stage area. Same concept, building out those sections. Finished section there with diffusion and absorption and diffusion at the top. And more of the combination HVAC tape going on for the combo panels. And here's some fabrics samples I picked up. This is the black that I used, obviously, in the majority of the room, and then a couple of contrasting colors that I was considering for the column covers. I believe this is what I ended up with. I think the Acoustimac Executive graphite, I believe, is what I used on the column. And there's a kind of a blurry shot of the right hand side of the room where the window is. You can see things are coming together. And back to the front side of that column with the wire being pulled down, and you can see where that ended up. I used my little base mold piece here again to conceal that wiring as it got pulled to the front of the room and up onto the stage area for the front speakers and the subwoofers. More laser level fun. Speaker wire pulled into this column at the window. Test spinning or just seeing how the fabric would look on the columns. Two options there I narrowed it down to. And this is a shot of the front stage where I used some mass loaded vinyl. This is a really heavy rubber that's stapled to this screen wall area here. Just trying to cut down on propagation, I guess, of the sound and the vibration of all of these speakers and the subwoofers that were up on the stage here, trying to isolate that as best I could. And there's a big pile of wire for the speakers and subs again. And there's the frame assembled for the first time, just sitting up there out of the way. And again, just doing a little bit of testing out of desperation to see a picture on the screen. Just use some of my wife's white craft paper to mock up a really messy looking screen. And this is a shot of the panels that I built for the inset panels for the columns. So these were just 1x2 sections. Again, the white pine, uh, stapled those together. And then they get the fabric stapled to the covers, and then they just push right in, basically friction fit. So again, could I have made all of this black? Sure, but I just thought I needed a little contrast in the room and make it not quite so boring. So I said staple, but I did staple the material to these sections, but to hold these sections together, I did end up using pocket holes. So just trying to use out some of my new tools, and they work pretty well. And there's a shot of my little assembly process. I would cut the fabric pieces and then lay the covers down on top of those and just stretch like a canvas that material over the frame and staple it together. So every one of these was a little different, obviously. So a lot of measuring. And again, the laser level here, I think I was just trying to line up my tweeters and the Atmos speakers to the seating position. And here's a shot of one of these side surround speakers. These are the Triad Bronze surrounds. These are actually made to go in wall, but they worked out great in this scenario because my columns were deep enough to hold these where they wouldn't be seen. And with my covers on the columns, you would never know there were speakers there. So I kind of had to mock up a way to mount these just using scrap wood. So this is just like 1x2s and sections of 1x4 um, screwed together and attached to the wall. There's a closer shot of that. So these have little sections where they're supposed to be secured to the inside of drywall because again, these are meant to be used in wall as in wall speakers. So I still used these, but I drilled holes into my wood securing pieces here and just installed the speakers that way. So these little sections that slide out and slide down go into holes here and secure the speaker in place. So these aren't going anywhere. And there's that support board I was talking about in front of this window where I needed to mount a speaker. So, and this is the rear of the room, again with a column and a rear surround going in there. Things are almost finished at that point. There's a close-up view of the Stewart Studio Tech frame, screen frame. And there's my little Facebook Marketplace rack I picked up. And a piece of equipment coming into the room. This was an 8-channel amp. And I got everything installed at that point into the rack. Got the Anthem AVM 70 up here. Some blank plates for air circulation. There's the VTV 8-channel amp. And then what I was using at the time was these Crown DSI 1000 amps for the JBL speakers. So these are really custom made for those speakers. They have built-in DSPs for those speakers, and they sounded good, but they had kind of a high noise floor, and I was getting like some humming and hissing from these. So I ended up pulling these out at some point, but that's what I started with. And then there's the Panasonic 4K disc player on the bottom. So there's the back of the rack, starting to get wiring pulled in the XLR cables out of the channel amp, and all that gets pulled up to the Anthem AVM 70. And this is the way all of the columns ended up looking when I was finished with them. They all got stuck with pink insulation all the way to the top and the bottom, even in these areas. And this was a challenging little scenario to come up with here. This is the screen wall, and of course the ceiling is angled at this point, so I have to hang something that needs to be straight vertically on a angled surface. So I had to custom build my screen hanging brackets here. So there was a lot of laser leveling and measuring going on at this point, and a lot of guesswork. So there's the screen frame hanging in place. I was pretty proud of myself at that point that that came out nicely and everything was hanging level. There's a backside shot of that. So the screen itself comes with bridge cleats, which I ended up mounting to these wood sections to hang the actual screen on. And there's a shot of the screen with the material in place. This material snaps in place with the Stewart screen. And getting close to the end here, so let's get pretty excited, getting the speakers pulled into the room. This is kind of a weird shot, though. This is the void behind the screen and then the wall. So there's a space of about not quite 3 feet back here where the speakers sit, and you can see the light from the projector coming through the screen and hitting the back wall here. So obviously that was going to be a problem, even though this was all black in here and you could not see it back through the screen. This was all going to get covered up at one point with insulation and black fabric. So this is not necessarily an order, but this is a truck showing up to deliver my GSG audio behind the screen subwoofer flat packs. So this was uh, two 21-inch Lavoche drivers. These are 4 ohm drivers. And then the MDF flat packs to build 2 complete subwoofers. So you can see they marked the pallet as 523 pounds, and it felt like every bit of it. So it's just like putting together a puzzle. This was really fun, but you need a little space to spread out. So I put these together out of the garage, and they say, people ask, well, how many clamps do you need? You need all of them. So just go to, I already had quite a few of these Irwin clamps, but I ended up going to Harbor Freight and picking up quite a few more, and they're very inexpensive there. So just get everything you think you'll need. So again, these are really fun to build. They have great instructions. And, I did all this by myself, even with as heavy and unwieldy as some of these pieces are, you can totally do it yourself. Just have a little patience. And there's one of the subwoofers glued up and sitting on the cart so I can move it around. So one down and one to go. And there's the second one finished up. So it looks almost like a washer and dryer set. So I didn't do the best job of sanding and finishing these because in the back of my mind, I knew they were going to be sitting behind the screen. These are the Nutrix connectors that are used for the subwoofer connections, bring the wire into them. So this was a primer job I did on these. And I've made the connections, my 12-2 speaker wire coming into the Nutrix speak-on connectors. And this is the side that goes inside the subwoofer, and the other side that I just showed was what goes into your amp. Again, these were easy to put together if you have some simple crimping tools and wire cutters. And there's the finished subwoofers. These ended up with kind of a Dortex rough finish. And again, I could have done a better job on these, but at this point, I was just ready to get the thing moving. So the speakers are up on the stage. And again, doing some laser leveling and measuring, making sure speakers are equidistant to each other and that horns are turned in correctly. And here's a close up of what happened with my shoddy paint job on these subs, where it kind of created a crackly finish. It looked almost like they'd been on fire, according to my wife. So that really made me feel good. Um, I thought it could look kind of like a leathery finish, kind of cool, but whatever. And these are the stands, I guess you'd say, that the subwoofers sit on. This allows them to be ported out the front because the way they come without the stands, they're ported on the sides. So if you set them on top of these, then these become front firing or front ported. Again, it's like a big puzzle. And there's the finished room. Mostly finished anyway. Had a little more work to do around the door at this point, but all the columns were up, the stage was together, the screen was assembled, the ceiling was painted, and the light fixtures were in. So I was feeling pretty good about myself at that point. The side view, and there's the painted stands for the subs. These are just some little pieces I made to help balance the screen to keep it from spinning forward and back. So I just kind of mocked up some little brackets and wood pieces to secure. And there's the one and only injury in the process of building the room where I literally drilled through my finger because I'm an idiot. And there's a shot of what I made here to kind of fill the gap between where the screen ends and the walls begin. So just used some of my DMD fabric and secured it to the ceiling on both sides to create kind of a curtain transition effect. And same thing on the other side. This is a shot of the inside of one of the subwoofers where the connection comes in. A little better shot with some light. And there's the outside. And at this point, I've got the subwoofers pulled up the stairs as heavy as they were. And they are in the room and about to install the drivers. That's a shot of the, I believe the U-Mic 1 or whatever mic comes with the Anthem AVM 70 for doing the calibrations and room correction. And that's the nice little tripod they give you with the microphone. And there's the completed subwoofers with the drivers installed. And the subs are sitting up on the stage. At this point, I did not have the stands underneath them. And there they are with the stands. So you can see it this way, they're able to port out the front. So, this doesn't look real pretty. These are not flattering shots, but all of this sits behind the screen and serves its purpose there. Here's a shot of the back of the room when I'm trying to figure out what to do with the projector because, again, I have this weird slanted ceiling and I don't know how I'm going to mount this thing. So I'm up in the attic trying to figure out what's above that space and what can I do over here. And while I'm thinking about that, I decided to fill in around the speakers and deaden this front stage area. And I have to say that this floor to ceiling and 3 foot deep of pink insulation totally transformed the sound of the room more than anything else I did. So eventually this got covered in the same DMD black fabric, so you don't see any of this anymore. There's the screen sitting back in place, rear of the room again. And there's one of the rear surrounds. Again, these are from Triad. Rear of the room, rear surround columns, and exploratory surgery into the rear of the ceiling where the projector needed to be mounted. In the attic again, in the attic again, and a bigger exploratory hole in the ceiling. So this beam here is what was preventing me from mounting the projector where I wanted it to be. And removing this was going to be about a $25,000 overhaul of the ceiling structure and roof structure. So that was not going to happen. And this was just briefly to see if this would work, but it was never going to work because this was not conditioned space up here. And it was just too restricting for the projector to be able to breathe. And I didn't have the depth I needed here because there's HVAC chase right here and a drop going right there. So there just wasn't room. So still trying to figure out what to do back here. And in the meantime, I found this nice rack on Facebook Marketplace again. And I looked at this model, and I believe this is like a $1,200 or $1,300 rack. I got this thing for $100, so I couldn't get there fast enough to take it off the guy's hands. He had plans to build a medium room. It kind of fell through at the time, and he was just trying to get rid of stuff. So this was a great find. It came with all the shelves, the glass door, the caster wheels, everything. There's another shot of the front of the room. Just kind of doing a little bit of cleanup. And there's my first image up on the screen, which didn't necessarily look great at the time because I hadn't done any kind of calibration or setup yet, but just started to give me an idea of the scope of the room and the way things would look, which is kind of exciting. And here I've got the room covered up because we're going to do a little bit of the ceiling here. So you can see that the HVAC air duct here is pulled out because that's going to get moved over. And we've got this huge opening in the ceiling to accommodate a bit of a recess and a flat area to mount the projector. So this no longer is angled. This is opened up and made flat here. So a little bit of structure there to accommodate drywall. And there's what it looks like when it's all drywall in. And you see I now have a flat ceiling here to work with to mount the projector a little further back. And again, on a flat surface and get back a little bit of height back here. And there's the ceiling vent moved over from where it was. And that's above that area. And there's the drywall finished and mudded and sanded. Picture of the door for some reason. And this is the area where the projector was going to get mounted. So I installed a outlet for that and a place to pull through HDMI. Outlets all wired up and everything's painted black. That was the first coat, but you can see what it was going to look like at that point. So again, that's vent got moved over. We created a space here to mount the projector. There's one of the rear surrounds mounted in the column. Back of the rear surround. Again, back of the rear surround. And there's the projector sitting in place. And again, this is not where its final destination would be, because as much as I would like to have had it sit here, it really restricted airflow because the JVC vents out the front and the intake is on the rear. So with this pushed into this little pocket, it was just running too loud. I could hear it kicking into high fan mode because it wasn't getting enough air breathing in it. So that wasn't going to work. Another shot of the screen, kind of playing around with the Zudu media player.